Hey, what's up? Today we're going to be doing a timing belt on a 2014 Honda Accord 3.5 liter. And this is the car here. It's easiest to take the passenger side tire off, and the plastic cover here connects here and here, of course, so you can get to everything. Of course, timing belt's behind this cover back here. Crank pulley and everything's going to have to come off. Serpentine belt tensioner here. That's where we're going to start. We're going to remove the belt. Get the PCM cover out of the way. Now, see these tabs to remove the PCM? Push down, pull back, slide right out. Get the wires out of the way for the PCM. That way you got more room to work with timing belt area here. And let's go ahead and take the PCM bracket out. Looks like there's 2 screws holding it in. PCM's out. That would have been good. First cover's off. Belt's off. Take that wiring harness out of the way so that we can get to your bolts. Back covers off. Front cam, rear cam. Engine mount out and keep it as one piece, that way it's easier to put back together. These bolts that go through here, they could be a pain, they could be cross-threaded sometimes, so be careful of them. Put anti-seize on them when you go back together. Okay, so see this here? Honda has a special socket that goes in here. These can be extremely tight, so I just like hitting it with my gun until it comes free. For anybody else who's trying to start out, you'll probably have to have this tool to get this crank pulley broke free, but try as you may. Just warned, it's really torqued. That'll work. No shit. I'll take it right off. Thank you.
I wonder if they actually work.
Yeah, they work like stuck lug nuts too.
What side?
I think it's like 17, 19, 21 or something like that.
Okay, now comes the fun part, getting these last little screws out. See here, that's cover bolt there, cover bolt there. There's one, see it right there? And then there's one right there, one up there behind the oil pressure sanding unit. And there. Take all your cover bolts out and get the cover off. Bottom cover's off. Now there's the crank pulley. Underneath that, where the motor mount was bolted to, that's the water pump. There's an idler pulley there. That's the tensioner pulley. And see that piece? It's a little dark with a little hole in it right there. That's the tensioner. Always replace those. First, this bolt here, 14 millimeter. There's 3 of them in this bracket. We're gonna take those out. More. Okay. Now that bolt's loose, you're gonna have to leave it in there until you get the top 2 out. But that's pretty much everything you need to do from the bottom right now. It wouldn't hurt to take your crank bolt, put something on it. Put something on it as a spacer, screw it in, because you're going to need to turn the crankshaft to line up the timing marks. And remember, always turn the crankshaft clockwise. Never turn it counterclockwise, because you'll cause the belt to jump. All right, now we're gonna lower the car back down and I'll show you everything from the top from here on out. Okay, now we're gonna finish taking off this bracket. Remember I told you to leave that bolt in the bottom? Well, there's two more in the top. One here and one here. Ah, come on. All right. Now the mount's out. All three bolts stay in it and set it aside. Now, all right, here's your water pump, tensioner pulley, idler pulley, front cam, rear cam, not sure which bank it is, don't really care at this point. I label them front and rear when I'm doing timing belt anyway. So now we're going to rotate the cams until the timing marks line up. There's a mark there, there's a mark there, and there's also marks on the camshaft. I'm going to mark everything up and I'll show you. Okay, now I want you to check out my yellow marks. I've marked everything off. That way you know where everything's lined up at. Front cam, yellow line on the back of the cover, on the belt, on the front of the cam, back of the cover, belt, cam. Crank pulley gets a little tricky. See the dot at the top of the pulley there? I'll line it up with there's an arrow on the back of the block to line it up straight up and down. And then I always put a mark over here to the side because I transfer marks from the one belt to another to make sure they go back on right. Now we pull the tensioner and yank the belt out. Tensioners down there, two 10mm bolts. Sometimes you got to take the oil pressure sending unit out, which I'm probably going to have to on this one. So bear with me. Did you see how I did that? See how I marked? I rotated everything up, lined all my marks up, marked the belt.
So where were the marks on the pulley?
The mark on the pulley is where the yellow is.
Okay, so you covered it up.
Yep.
Okay.
I put a mark there, put a mark on the belt, put a mark on the pulley, on the cover.
Okay, and a little notch in the cover.
Okay, that way you know if the camshaft moves, you know if the belt moves, and you know if it moves in reference to the back of the bullet.
So the notch there and the notch on the case.
Yeah.
Cool.
You can see there's
Yep,
that right
a
there's
little
the notch. Yeah.
And there's a little notch on
And
the
there's a
front.
notch right here on both front and rear cams. And that, like I said, that bottom one is a little tricky. The point that you look at is so high up that you got to kind of guess. As long as it's in the general vicinity, you're okay.
Yeah, the one on the side is just random.
Yeah, the one on the side is random. That's just where I like to, that way I know where the belt goes on the crankshaft pull.
Yep.
First setting units out. Now you see a little better. These two bolts on this tensioner. That's the timing belt tensioner. Always replace that. Tensioners off. Save your bolts, of course. And now take the belt off. Oh, and don't forget, because I transfer my marks, mark this one your front cam, that way you know which one it is going back together. See the marks? Set your timing belt aside. I'll show you how to transfer them. Now, replace your tensioner pulley, your idler pulley, and then we got your water pump. Always be mindful on the tensioner pulleys, because this piece needs to be transferred to the new tensioner pulley setup. That way the tensioner can roam freely with the automatic. When the automatic tensioner pushes on it, this is hydraulic. See, this one's leaking, so always replace them. And that pushes against there, but yeah, make sure you take this piece, transfer it over to your new tensioner setup. Now these have Loctite on them. Make sure you replace the Loctite when you go back together. That way if the pulley locks up, it doesn't back out the bolt. That's why it's so hard to get out. And pay attention too, because these only go on one way. This keeps it out away from the block. You can't really tell on here, but it keeps it out away from the block so it doesn't rub. Five more bolts and the water pump's off. Make sure you get the old gasket off too, because they tend to stay stuck to the block. That's the weep hole there. You can see a little bit of discoloration in there. This was on its way to start leaking. Old gasket material. Good to go. Always do a once over with a rag or a light Brillo pad or something, just to get any kind of debris that's stuck on the flat surface here. And make sure it stays clean so the new water pump will have a good mating surface. Today's I'm using an Asian kit from Worldpac. That's the part number there. But the kits come with instructions, of course. Tells you where all your marks are and everything. That way you have it. Okay. Your belt. Sometimes these are pre-marked. This one doesn't appear to be, so we'll set that aside for later. Water pump. This one already has the gasket in it, so that's what we're going to need first. So set it here. New tensioner. Always replace these. I can't stress enough. Always replace these. Tensioner pulley. Remember what I said? Swap this back into the new one. Put your bolt in it, and don't lose that. New idler pulley. Remember, side specific. Transfer your bolt from one to the other. Make sure you keep them the same way. Don't forget to put Loctite on it. And of course, half the time it gets forgotten, but timing belt sticker. Fill it out. Put it where the customer can see it underneath the hood somewhere, usually attached to the hood. Now we go back together. Now the water pump does have a couple dowels. They need to go in specific holes. See them here and here. If you tighten up any one of these other bolts out here, you will break this. So be mindful to what you put in first. There we go. It just didn't look right. Okay, this has got the towel, the top one right here. Then we've got the bottom one catty corner from it over here. Those are the two you want to tighten first. Like I said, if you tighten any of the other ones, you will break it, especially if you're using air. When tightening it, run it in, snug it up, go tighten the other one. Now you can tighten the rest of your bolts. Alright. Tensioner pulley goes back on. Alright. Tighten it. Okay, and see, tensioner pulley still has some play in here. So, that's what we're looking for. A little bit of Loctite. Cover gasket. I went ahead and talked to about Now, I'm sorry if y'all don't have some of these tools. Some of this is going to be a pain in the ass without some of the tools that I have. But remember, I do this every day. So, typically what you're going to need is a 17 millimeter, a 19 millimeter, a 14 millimeter, and a 10 millimeter. That's pretty much it. Sockets, ratchets, wrenches, anything you can get your hands on in those 3, 4, whatever sizes. That's pretty much all you're going to need. All right. And now we transfer our marks on the belt. I'll show you how to do that in a second. Okay, so now I'm going to show you how to transfer your marks on the timing belt. This could be a little tricky, so I'm going to try and explain as best I can to you. All right, you got both your belts, the old and the new. Okay, you need to pick a spot. Alright, see how I got the belts lined up? Okay, you're going to keep the belt lined up like this the entire time, and you're going to transfer your marks from your old belt to your new belt. Okay? And by doing this, it's like the timing belt never came off. So you know you can always get it back in the same position the timing belt was. That way you don't have to worry about it being a tooth off. Because if you transfer your marks correctly, it's like the timing belt never moved. Go all the way around and make sure your first mark lines back up again. And then, guess what? Belt's marked. Now you can put it back together. Okay. Now that we're here, I always find it easiest to put it on the back cam first. And a little word to the wise. Using these paper clips, once you get the belt seated on one of the cams, slap one of these paper clips on it. It holds it in place, stops it from moving. That way you ain't got to worry about it popping off and jumping a tooth. You can keep it lined up in time. See, second one. See my mark? Lined up? If you knew, and Pop your clip on the front one. Now comes the tricky part, getting the crankshaft to line up. Sometimes you got to play with it back and forth just a little bit to get it to line up properly, but just make sure you get them lined up. All right, now once you got your belt on here, keep in mind to make sure all your marks are lined up. Show you. Okay, front cam lined up. Yeah, it's a little off because I turned the belt a little bit, getting it back together, but they're all the same. My marks transferred, lines are marked up. Marks are lined up, sorry. There we go, see, they're all off the equal amount. Now we gotta put the tensioner pulley back in. Or the tensioner itself. See, there's the tensioner pulley right there. And it's gonna go in those two holes off to the left right there. So, that's next. Okay, this pin, okay, make sure that it's flush with the back side of it, because if it sticks out too much, it will hit the back of the block and it won't seat up properly. So make sure that is flush, and don't pull this pin until you're absolutely ready to, because compressing this down is a pain in the ass. It can be done, but it is a huge pain in the ass. So make sure everything's right before you pull the pin. Two hardened bolts for it. All right, once you verified that everything's good to go and all your marks are still lined up, now you can pull the pin. All right, you got your pin pulled out, and now best thing I can tell you to do is rotate the crankshaft 2 full revolutions. That way you can get it back around to top dead center again, and make sure all your marks are lined up, and then you'll be clear to put all the covers and everything back together. Remember, turn clockwise. 2. Two revolutions. That mark's lined up. Now the belt's not going to line up again because of how many teeth it is. You'd have to go around like 160 times or something like that to get the marks to line back up again. But you make sure these are lined up. This one to this one. Again, back there. Same thing there. And looking back down at the crankshaft, got the same 2 marks there. Okay. Everything's lined up. Now we go back together with the engine mount and everything like that. So pay attention. Okay, going back together with the engine mounts. Engine mount bracket anyway. And remember, at least get all the bolts started before you tighten one down. Because if you get one of these brackets or something off center a little bit, trying to get the bolt started when everything's tight, not gonna happen. So keep them loose until you get them all at least finger started. Give you a little easier time working with it. All right, now we go back to the bottom. All right, now we're going back together with the lower cover. See if I can get this a little straighter for you. All right, now we're going back with the lower cover. Don't forget to tighten your lower engine mount bracket bolt while you're down here too. All right, go ahead and pull your spacer off your crank pulley or crank bolt. Do not forget this. Put this back on. This is a guide, and it's tapered one way, so the timing belt will ride on the crank gear. See how it's tapered? Now we're pretty much done from down here. Don't forget to put your oil pressure sanding unit back in, which I have forgotten so far, but I'm fixing to put it in now. All right, now I'm putting back together the oil pressure sanding unit. Goes back in that little slot down there. Probably easier to get it through the fender well. Now, this has to slide into this groove right here on the lower cover. So you can see the line in there. There's another one here on top of this cover here. So you got to make sure you line them in when you go back together with it, or it won't sit properly. And again, start all your bolts before you tighten one. That way you can move the cover up and down and get the bolt started. You don't cross thread anything or break anything off, because that's the last thing you want, breaking a bolt off in the block on this thing. Don't forget to plug back in your oil pressure sanding unit. That's the wire that runs on top of this cover over here. Now it's time for your front cover. Again, see the groove? All the way around, it's got one here. And all of these timing cover have the same kind of bolt. Got that little shank on it. They only be tightened so much. Keeps them spaced out. And there's no need to over torque them. I mean, it's just holding a cover on. Alright. I always put a new serpentine belt on anytime I do a timing belt on pretty much any car. That's just better that way. You place both belts at the same time, chances are they'll last twice as long. So we're putting a new belt on it also. Alright. Make sure your belt's all lined up on all the pulleys. You're not off a tooth or anything. One of the, or off a rib on one of the pulleys on the belt. Put your engine mount back in place. Put NECs on them.
Answer the door back there, you were laughing at NASCAR. I can imagine. I was an older white dude laughing at
forget your ground strap here. Alright, pull your PCM over, PCM wiring over, tuck it out of the way, tuck that plug in out of the way. For hard to reach bolts, I take a piece of paper, a piece of plastic, something, shove it in the socket. That way it doesn't really fall out. You can get it down into hard to reach places. Now the PCM only goes in one way. All right, now we got the last little cover here. All right, everything's snapped into place. Make sure all your wires are tucked in. Now, fill it up with coolant and start her up. This is a spill-free funnel. Get one of these. These are awesome. Comes with multiple attachments to fill any cooling system. Helps you get the air out of it. don't forget to fill this out. Now, sorry, I like putting those right here. I'll clean this off, and that's where the sticker will be.
Pretty much done.
Yeah. There it is. Easy as that. All right, now comes the moment of truth. Let's start it. Well, she's running, purring like a kitten. Means everything's right. All right. Now, after we got the car running, you want to make sure you run it for a little while. Get the car up to operating temperature. Burp the coolant. Make sure the thermostat opens up. That way, you don't have any air pockets trapped in the engine. You don't get any overheating, nothing like that. And you want to double check everything while it's running. I mean, double check all your bolts, nuts. Make sure you tightened everything. Make sure if you have a magnet or something like I do, the only thing I have left in my magnet is the pin for the timing belt tensioner. But everything else, you just make sure everything's good, make sure the coolant's topped off, have it running for a little while, get it to operating temperature, turn the heat on, get everything circulating so you don't have any trapped air pockets. All right, thanks. Like, subscribe, post, you know the deal.